Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Sunday Afternoon Smokes, your casual conversation podcast from the upstate of South Carolina. My name is Chris. I'm your host. I'm also the owner and operator of The Cigar Box, a mobile cigar bar that serves the upstate and beyond. If you've been listening and enjoy these conversations, the best way you can support the show is just to give it a follow, and I'd really appreciate that. Today, I have the opportunity to hang out with for a while with Geoff Rhyne. Geoff, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So the way I like to operate here is I just let my guests introduce themselves. So take a minute, say as much or as little about yourself as you like, and while you do that, I'm going to light my cigar.
Awesome. My name is Geoff Rhyne. I am the chef founder of a little company called Red Clay Provisions. We make food products ranging from hot sauce to hot honey, chili crisp, basically trying to modernize the Southern pantry through a chef's lens. And then I'm also the founder and executive director of a nonprofit called iDefine.
Nice. I've got some Red Clay hot honey in my cupboard.
Do you?
I do. I have acquired that at, I think it was in the chef's guest bag from Southern Roots year number 1.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I was at Southern Roots first year as a helper with Jason Jansen at Broadwater.
Yep.
So I think I still have that. And then I also have the actual Red Clay hot sauce.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff, man.
It is. It's we have a couple of anchors products, but as a chef, I'm always tinkering, right? And so I'm always thinking about new products. My whole background of 20 years plus in kitchens. And so now I love making food products.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like you specialize more in the condiment world than you do the actual like food itself? Or
yeah, so
I don't mean that to be insulting.
No.
Okay.
I got pretty thick skin. I think I always refer to my chef career as I was a butcher. That's what I love to do, which it sounds a little bit dark, I guess, if you look at it in some light. But for me, one of the beautiful things about working in kitchens was the sourcing of the ingredients, working with the farms, working with the fishermen. And I just had this deep appreciation that I didn't realize until later, connecting the dots of my childhood with my chef career, about how all of that was intertwined. And so when folks would show up at the back door with a pig or with a whole fish, that was where I really enjoyed myself in the kitchen. The plating stuff, service was obviously like a big rush and it was fantastic, but the most joy I got was when I would actually go to the table and tell the person about where that fish came from or where that vegetable came from and the nuances of it and just completely dork out about it.
Sure. Well, I'm a guy. I'm a Texas man, which means I love meat. I love barbecue. I love meat of all kinds. And I wound up, listeners, forgive me, you've heard this umpteen times, but, I used to work at Revival Butchery in the West Village. And, it was just a natural moment for me just because, cutting meat is fun.
Yep.
And learning how to do things is fun. Learning how to French a rack of lamb, is fun. Learning how to break down a ribeye, learning how to take out, a pork belly or the St. Louis style ribs or the spare ribs or turning that whole section into a pork tomahawk or all of that, or breaking down a fish, which I learned to do with my dad as a kid, doing a lot of bass fishing, catch it, fillet it, do that, all that stuff. It's just super enjoyable.
Yeah, it's surgical.
It is. It is surgical, but I think people misunderstand how much work it really is.
Oh, it's a lot of work. I remember it's one thing I learned over the time is, you get a chicken. You start pretty basic when you start butchering and you figure out how to debone a chicken, and then you graduate to a pig, and then you understand how the different muscular structure works. And then it becomes almost a puzzle of reverse engineering the puzzle, right? This puzzle's been put together, but then you have the loin, you have the belly, you have the butts, you have the shoulders, you have the necks. And how do you break this thing down where you're honoring the integrity of the ingredient? Like that pig had a life, right? And someone, put it down so that we could consume it and enjoy it and nourish our bodies. But how you do so, I think, you have to have an integrity about how you do that. It just can't be careless.
Sure.
So And then graduating from that to then doing a half side of a cow. It's like, okay, this is a completely different animal, pardon the pun, but it's just, I mean, it's a beast, right?
Yeah, we did half cows at Revival from time to time. We did whole pigs with regularity, and just working with both of them, you learn very quickly that there are so many more cuts on a cow
Right.
than there are on a pig. So just from my personal point of view and the experience I got there, breaking down a pig's pretty easy.
Yep.
It's not that hard, but with with a cow, like you said, I mean, and I'm tracking your lingo there, it literally is a whole different animal, literally and metaphorically, just with the muscle structure. There's just, I just figure with an animal that large, it has to have a lot more supporting structure than a pig does, which gives us, well, everything that the cow gives us.
Yep.
And of course, you wind up with a lot of hamburger,
Yeah.
which is great, because it's so versatile. But I don't know, man, there's just super fun. Have you ever done from start to finish as far as like kill the animal, skin the animal?
I haven't.
Do
No, it's you'd think that would have come up somewhere in my career, but it hasn't. I had an idea of wanting to when I lived outside Chicago. I worked with this farmer, Louis John Slagle, and Slagle Family Farms in Illinois. He had chickens and pigs and lambs and goats. And so at the place I was working at the time, we would get in a weekly delivery of like 12 chickens, a goat, a lamb, a whole pig. And we started a whole charcuterie program. And also one of my things was I wanted all the staff to know how to break down animals. And so I was at the cusp of probably taking that whole like 360 picture and putting it together. But then Chicago is a little bit too cold for a Southern boy like myself. And so I remember the winter of 2011 up there was so frigid. And I would walk out every single day with 3 feet of snow in the winter. I was like, you know what? I'm done. It's time. It's time to get back south. I can't stay here much longer. And so I hurried home to back to Charleston.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a practical question here for the listeners, because obviously most people aren't breaking down a half or a whole pig in their kitchen, but a whole chicken, I mean,
Yep.
You pick those up easy at Walmart or Publix or wherever it is you're getting your chickens. For a person that buys a whole chicken and wants to break it down and doesn't really know what they're doing, walk us through it.
Yeah. I mean, for me, honestly, it's almost like painting by numbers, right? I think about my kids and how they like color by numbers, or like they have like coloring books, and there's within these lines, there's almost things that you can trace, especially with a chicken, right? I mean, and for me, it's like, where's the most logical point to start? And it's along the breastbone. And that look, like what separates the two breasts on the chicken, if you just kind of segment it down on either side of that, and then just allow your knife to kind of follow the contour of it, and you peel it back slowly, then you remove the two largest parts of the chicken, which are the breasts. And once those are freed up, then you can kind of see the knuckle joist of where the thigh attaches to the main body, right? And so you can actually see in there, you can see the knuckle, you can see the cartilage, and you just break it right there. Similar within the thigh and the leg, there's a little joint there that you can easily segment, and same with the wing. Everybody has seen, a full wing, and then you have the drums and the flats, but there's this connecting part, and you just trace it. And once you do that, it's amazing how easily it comes apart, but you can't sleep on what's called the oyster in the chicken.
It's the best part of the bird.
Right? The two little nuggets.
Well, and even at Thanksgiving, the oyster on the back of the turkey.
Yeah,
it's the best.
That's the best. So that's what we used to, I remember at Fig, very early on, we used to roast chickens. I think we would roast, 6 to 8 a day, depending on the day of service. And then you would break them down into half portions. So you'd get a half a bird, but then you would flip it over and you'd have the oyster for yourself. So if you work in the meat station, you would flip over and you'd get, 8 to 16 little Scooby snacks to fuel you for service.
Yeah. I mean, because in a restaurant world, you're not going to put an oyster on a plate.
Nope.
It's just not. I mean, it's a great piece of meat, but it's not pretty to look at, and it just doesn't seem to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Because it's just this little oval
surprise
piece. Yeah, but it's so good. That's not exactly, I mean, that is a great way to do it. That is not what I expected you to say.
Yeah.
Mine's probably a little more butcher friendly. And it takes, of course, a sharp knife. I start at the backbone, standing the chicken up on its butt, and then a swift cut, down one side of the backbone, and then down the other side, and remove the back and the neck entirely. And now I can open that up, and hit the breastbone from the backside.
Yeah,
Crack it, and then I'm in halves. But I wouldn't be removing the breast off the bone in that.
so you're going a little more like spatchcock.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are, and then I have the chicken, and it's pretty easy once you do that, like you said, to find the thigh joint where it attaches, and you can literally, you don't need a knife for it if you want. You can just grab it and you can. Well, I'm trying to describe this on camera. I don't know what this move is right here. You can tilt it, and it'll pop out, and then you can cut. And there is, even if you look where the leg joins into the thigh, there's that little thin strip of fat.
Yep.
If you just cut right there with a little bit of gusto, you're clean through.
Yeah.
And then you have your bird.
And that's what we kind of, with like duck confit, we used to do a lot of duck, and where you take the legs out. And what you would do with the duck legs is you actually didn't, you could buy the duck legs themselves, or you could take them off. But a lot of times what we would do is actually confit it, which, just to make sure it's just cooking it in its own fat. And then once it comes out, that little thigh bone is so tender around it that you can just put your finger in and just give it a quick twist, and it just pops right out.
Nice. Well, since we're already way into chef life, we'll just go ahead and get into it. So you dove hard from wherever you were, and we'll wind up backtracking, but you shared with me before the show that you dove pretty hard into the culinary world.
Yep.
Why? What got you to that point?
By default. Really, I ended up in Charleston originally to play college baseball. I had my first couple of years in college, I went to University of Tampa and played baseball. For a variety of reasons, things didn't work out down there, so I transferred to CFC to play because I knew a lot of guys from Atlanta growing up that were on the CFC baseball team. And so I transferred there. Sat out. Back then, you had to sit out still for NCAA. There wasn't a transfer portal, and there was certainly no NIL. And so,
do you feel robbed?
A little
bit shafted.
I mean, knowing how I was and how I acted at that point, it's probably better that I wasn't able to have those kind of resources at my disposal. So, I actually moved in with the basketball team on Wentworth Street. And so everyone thought maybe I was the new point guard because that's who I would roll around with. But then I knew I needed a job. So I started working at a little pizzeria joint called That's Amore. And it was right on East Bay Street, kind of at the end of Calhoun, just washing dishes and delivering pizzas. You know, this is, obviously I'm dating myself. This is way before Uber Eats and DoorDash and all those things. And so I just started working in the restaurant there and fell in love with kind of the culture. Right. It was very team oriented. They're vagabond, a bit of a degenerate. It wasn't quite, the sports culture, the jock culture. There was something different about restaurant, but it was very familial, and that's what really connected me.
Yeah. From what I've observed in the restaurant culture and watching certain things from, of course, Anthony Bourdain or whatever, it's like, these guys are like pirates.
Yep.
You know, they wear these black and white checkered pants or houndstooth or whatever it is. And
Yep.
They all tatted up and for strange hours. And, I don't know that accurately. It's like you said, it's not jock culture. And it's not, what else did you say?
Well, I think it's more like societal.
Either.
No, pirate's pretty accurate. I mean, at least that was my experience. I mean, it was a lot of folks who were kind of on the fringe, right? They were still... There's so many people in the restaurant world that are just trying to figure things out, right? Not everyone goes into it with this really focused vision of becoming a chef. Not back then, at least. I think that's changed and evolved over the celebrity chef culture years, where people have seen a pathway there. For me, it was just like I needed to do something to earn some money, and so I kind of fell into it. But then, after 3 or 4 years of bouncing around, I decided I left CSC. I went to Trident Tech and their culinary program, started getting a little taste of what that meant to actually have some sort of an apprenticeship in the area. But it all shifted in 2004 when I started working at Fig in 2004. About 6 months, Fig is now this longtime revered restaurant icon, really, in Charleston, and is a landmark. But when I first started, it had been open for about 6 months. And so just working directly under Lotta and with those group of cooks back then, it reshaped the way I approached my job, where it then became more of a career. And I was, again, connecting kind of the dots of all this farm exposure and ingredient exposure to my youth and my childhood.
Mm-hmm. Do you, in some of the things you shared with me about your life, which we can or get into or not, just however the conversation goes, I mean, what I read, I get the feeling like you feel like the early years, or what you would call the lost years, were kind of chaotic. Um, and kitchens, of course, or they are, in my estimation, they're ordered chaos.
Yep.
To give, for lack of a better description, though. And so your life is changing, and you enter into this restaurant world, and you feel like maybe your life has been a bit chaotic. So did a kitchen in some ways feel familiar?
Yeah, chaos was my existence, right? I mean, I think from a very early age, chaos was something that was always in my life in some way, shape, or form. And so I've referenced to a couple of people recently that, like, one of my quote unquote superpowers is I'm very comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's just because of so much disruption from the time I was young all the way through, and I still haven't figured things out. And so we were just talking earlier about how I can't just sit still.
Mm-hmm.
The stillness and the quiet is something I've never experienced. And so that makes me uncomfortable. And so now I'm trying to do more of it. The only time I am is outdoors. Like, if I'm outdoors, I can sit and I can just listen, right? But for the most part, I can't be indoors. I can't sit. I can't sit in the office culture. That's not how I'm just not constructed that way.
Right. Well, I was going to challenge you a little bit on that self-assertion in one way, because you said that you love to build fires, which, I mean, if you're a man, you should love to build fires.
Right.
If you don't love to build fires, we need to check your man card
Right.
status. And by the way, I full agreement with you. Shout out to Greenville Fire Pit Nights.
Yeah.
They
Matt and
make,
Amy.
yeah, they're fantastic. They make great stuff. But starting a fire it's a patient endeavor.
Yeah.
And so it requires you to sit. And of course, you are doing something inactively. You're waiting for it to catch. So, but when you said I can sit outdoors,
Yeah.
do you find that building a fire helps you just kind of relax? And
Yeah, there's something very carnal about it, right? There's something very, I mean, we laugh, folks that know me well, that I'm like the third guy over on the Cro-Magnon chart. Like, I'm very much a knuckle dragger, right? I'm not so evolved yet, and so there's something about a fire that still has like this amazement to me, right? And so, and I like to go big. Right? My wife will, even now, my wife will come outside. She's like, I think you might want to, rein it in a little bit, because we live in a neighborhood and some people frown upon it, but there's just something very calming about it. And when I think back to some of my early years, my grandparents would take us out in the middle of the night in South Georgia, like really country roads, and we'd set up camp by a lake and build a fire, right, and do s'mores. And those very basic experiences, I think, formed something inside of me that, again, you don't always recognize in real time the connections to your past, but eventually the dots start connecting, and it's like, oh, okay, this is probably why I have an affinity for this, is because of this experience that was very formative in my early years.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and I have a lot of those same experiences with my brothers and my parents. And in '89 they bought some lake property that was totally raw, and we just kind of carved a road. But there were many nights just building fires.
Yep.
And there's something, I mean, fire is comforting, fire is friendly, fire is a necessity. Fire, of course, is dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. But it is mesmerizing, and it's captivating. And I don't know, I think if people could just go build a fire and sit a while, it would probably help them mentally.
Sure.
Just relax, decompressed. Do you feel like fire for you and the focus that it allows is survival?
I think it's a necessary pause. Like my mind is constantly going, and I think I need those for me to be the best version of me. I need to be able to find those moments of solitude where I can just take a deep breath, recalibrate, and then get back out there. And it's interesting, as we were talking about, how we're drawing these connections back to early years, for the fires, back to my early years. But I can draw parallels to food, and that's exactly why there's so much conversation around the Southern table and food and being around the table with one another, is because it's that connection to your past, to a cultural past. There's so many connections and parallels there with food that is so symbolic but so meaningful. It's like I can remember my grandmother's table vividly. Like my memories suck from when I'm like 11 and before, because a lot of reasons. I think concussions has something to do with it too. But I can remember the jar of sorghum on the table. I can remember where the table sits. I can see her kitchen and the cabinets and the warm biscuits, right? And all those things, the smells, the aromas. And then it just gives me this calm of what that felt like to be taken care of, right? And I think food can carry that power through a bunch of different experiences.
No, it certainly can. I'm curious, from what you said, and everybody knows, I mean, there are various parts of the country. There's the South, there's the North, there's the West, there's the Northeast, there's the Northwest, however many ways we want to break it down. But, here we are in the South, and we're talking about Southern food or the Southern table. Is there in your experience, having been in Chicago a while, drawing, how do I want to say this? Obviously, no matter what part of the country you're in, you can have food memories that take you back.
Sure.
Right. But do you find that maybe there's just some nuanced differences between like Southern tables and Northern tables? So what are they?
I think it's a connection to the land, right? I think it goes back to the kind of agrarian, agricultural influence that the South had that maybe the northern areas didn't have. You see it with California cuisine, quote unquote, right? I mean, there's a huge agricultural influence. So it's not just the food on the table, like it's also the process of getting that food to the table is so embedded in who we are. And then you have all these different cultural influences. And I talk about Charleston a lot through Red Clay and how Charleston's history is complicated. And I mean, I think that's probably saying it gently, but it's got so much pain and so much complication to it, and then it also has produced so much beauty. And you can say that about New Orleans too. I mean, think about all the cultural influence there, but there's all these different cultural influences in the South that have made up Southern cuisine, and you're still seeing it today. I mean, you're seeing constantly I think what the Southern table is continues to evolve. And that's what I hope for Red Clay to be, is a part of that conversation. And I think one of our products, our chili crisp, is, has roots in Asia. But how do we actually, there's huge Asian populations in Atlanta and all throughout the South, right? And so how does that cultural influence become part of the lexicon that is Southern food? And I think we're seeing it and having it in real time. And it's really interesting to me. So I think it's for Southern food to be this identifiable cuisine. It's like, you don't have, Southern food has outposts in, Seattle, in Chicago, in New York, right? You don't have New York style food, maybe a deli, right? A specific event, but like Midwestern food, you don't really see that popping up elsewhere. And I think it's because of the connection to the food, the landscape, and then all the cultures that have made this thing something that kind of stands on its own.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a fusion, right? I mean, if you're making a Red Clay chili crisp and you're making it part of the Southern table, but it has its roots in the East.
Yeah.
So how are you taking, what are you doing to take a chili crisp and fuse it with Southern? I mean, what are the flavor profiles you're going for there? What are you throwing in it? Like, I don't know if that's too proprietary, but
No,
you can get into it. Like, what's the spin or the fusion that you're doing?
Yeah, for me, it's celebrating Southern ingredients. And again, I think that draws back to what I was describing before is what are the things that were in the fields? What are the ingredients that the South, whatever ingredients are in your area, that becomes a huge part of what your cuisine is, right? And so you can look at that anywhere throughout the world. And so if you look at the South, something that I'm very familiar with, my grandparents grew up and lived not 20 miles from Plains, Georgia, which is where Jimmy Carter's from, peanut capital of the world. And so peanuts are obviously all over the South. Boiled peanuts, roasted peanuts, all. I mean, I feel like Bubba from Forrest Gump. I can talk about peanuts. So we use peanut oil in our chili crisp. And then as opposed to sesame seeds, we use crushed peanuts. And so I think just that crunch really differentiates it. And then we do these particular chilies that have become kind of synonymous with red clay, especially with our original sauce, the Fresno chili, which has become really popular amongst chefs for its versatility and its sweetness. So we dehydrate Fresno chilies, and that's kind of how it becomes a red clay product, where we're not using some sort of Asian-inspired pepper or Italian-inspired pepper.
Gotcha.
We use it. And then I do derivatives, right? Like right now, I'm smoking the Fresno mash that we juiced to make our original hot sauce. I'm left with this pepper mash. And so now I'm smoking that pepper mash over pecan wood or pecan wood. So pecans, we had 7 trees in my grandparents' yard. I remember growing around, picking them up as a kid, eating them fresh, right? So that's super Southern. And then it creates a Chipotle style flavor, which is traditionally jalapenos, smoked over wood. And then that gives it that depth of profile. So now I'm making a Chipotle style chili crisp that then also infuses what Georgia barbecue is known for, which is a tomato-based sauce. So I take tomato powder and sumac, and then I mix it with this smoked chipotle pepper, and that's what then becomes our smoked chipotle-style chili crisp.
Sounds good.
It doesn't suck. I made it, and I mean, first of all, I'm smoking it, and then I come home, my kids are like, "You smell like fire," and that's a common theme in my house.
I mean, it's a
like
manly
fire.
smell.
Right,
a man should smell like
it's
fire.
my musk.
Yeah. Now, that sounds delicious, and it's so versatile. You can put that on so much stuff and just elevate your meat or your whatever. I mean, or just eat it straight out of the jar.
Collard greens. I'm actually, I have a lunch on Thursday with a couple of buddies, and we're going to Asia Pacific, which is the best Asian food in Greenville. And we get their pea shoots, or we get some of their different vegetable offerings, and I'm taking a jar of this chili crisp just to be able to spoon it over the top of it. They're going to be like, "What? This guy's bringing a jar in his pocket?"
brings his own sauces to my restaurant, man. Who is this guy? It's like bringing your own cigars into a cigar lounge. It's not, you know. But hey, well, it's an opportunity for you to educate them on a way to,
That's right.
plus up their whatever.
Yep. Well, who knows? It could end up on their shelf. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, let's zoom out just a little bit, because we just kind of, the way the podcast went, which is fine, we just dove into the chef world a little bit after you introduced yourself. But let's get broad. Like, who is Geoff Rhyne? So, and you've already said that, just your life was chaos and a little bit of information from this area, then wound up in Chicago and came back because it was too cold and other reasons, I'm sure. But so your life has a bunch of different chapters. That's how you described it. So if you were going to outline the book, what are the chapters? What are the titles?
I mean, the overcoming adversity is probably what my childhood's all about. And I think that has informed and built a lot of the filter that the rest of my life is decided upon. And so I think it would be easiest probably to describe that, and then you could understand how I arrived where I am, right? As if this was a book and a reader was going along, you would start with, what does the childhood look like? And it was, I'm from Atlanta, born in Decatur, Georgia, Grady Memorial Hospital, and probably, and again, it's fuzzy when I'm young, but when I'm a very small kid, probably like before I was a year, my parents got divorced, and that was, I don't have any kind of recollection of what that looked like, but the subsequent years were really, really challenging due to my father's alcoholism, his violence. From a very early on age, I was exposed to some really horrible domestic abuse things. I saw my dad break my mom's arm. I saw her beat her up. I saw just things that as a 5-year-old, as a 4-year-old, you shouldn't see.
Right.
Right. And then when I was 4, I want to say, I have a sister that's 3.5 years older than me, and she was doing horse riding lessons. And there was 2 horses at the stable that shouldn't have been put next to one another, and they did. And then something transpired where they told my sister to walk between them. As she walked between them, a horse kicked her in the head.
Oh, gosh.
And my sister went into a coma for, I want to say, 6 months. I remember she was given a 2% chance to live. And my mom would stay there day and night at the hospital. I don't really have any recollections of what that period was like. I have no idea who took care of me, how they took care of me. It's, again, I think you block some of this stuff out. I don't know that anybody's memories of being a 5-year-old are that clear, but certainly mine were covered up by some of these things. And so you move forward past that. My mom remarries. My first stepdad, it turns out to be not a great character either. And so he was a super alcoholic, would do a lot of things. And so you just, like, before I'm 10 years old, I'm on, that my first stepdad and my mom got divorced, I think, when I was 12. So I'd already gone through a couple of different quote unquote fatherly figures. So at that time, there was a lot of summers that my mom was, by all accounts, a single mom, and she would send me down to my grandparents, me and my sister, for extended periods of time in the summer. And that was in Ellaville, Georgia, small little town, about 50 miles southeast of Columbus. So it is one stoplight town, nothing. And my granddad was a former Marine, tough as nails, a tinkerer, a hunter. He did all kinds of things. He was very connected to the land. And so there was a lot of positive influence from that. I would say that my G-daddy, as I would call him, my G-daddy and my G-mama, and then my 2 uncles on my mom's side, my Uncle Andrew and my Uncle John, were both healthy male influences for me at the time, but they were also all in the military. One of my uncles was in the Marine, the other was in the Navy. My granddad was in the Marine. So it was definitely some tough love, and a lot of discipline. And so I think growing up without that fatherly influence has helped shape how I approach my own fatherhood. And so I think, as you navigate your early years, you want to make sure that you're putting a foundation in place for your kids to be successful. And for me, my mom was a rock star, but everything else around that time was full of chaos.
Yeah. Well, that's superhuman. And, I just look at what you're doing now with that background, and that's hard on a kid. That's hard on anybody.
Yeah.
Especially on a kid. My dad, loved my dad. My grandfather was a World War II vet, tail gunner out of a bomber, and came home, no doubt PTSD, which we didn't know anything about that stuff back then. So these guys are messed up.
But they saw some things.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was hard, my grandfather, my daddy said. And, so my dad's childhood had some rough moments. And somewhere along the way, my mom told me, basically, I don't know when, but my dad just decided, I'm going to be better than my dad for my kids. And like you
Yep.
have made that choice somewhere along the line, um, to not. Yeah, I mean, you're in essence breaking the cycle, because
Yeah.
a lot of guys or girls, they grow up, and you learn this because that's all you know. You're not in other people's homes; you're in your home with your parents, and kids learn by observing, and so this is just kind of reinforced into them, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And so they become a creature of what they have learned. And a lot of them turn out to repeat that cycle. But so what happened, man?
Yeah.
What happened for you? Obviously, good male influences from your uncles and your grandfather. But like, do you have a significant moment where it's very conscious to you that I'm just going to be different?
I don't know that I could draw it to a specific moment. I know that there was periods in my life where I felt the pain of that absence more than others. And there were times where I would go to drink, right? I would do things, what I call my kind of lost years is when I'm finally like getting out on my own and having to establish myself as a man. Like you think you're a man way before you actually are, right?
Hello.
And my mom would remind me of that, but at one point she just had to say, you know what, I'm done, right? Because I was a handful. Once I got in my adolescent years, it all started, all the rage, all that stuff started to come out, and it manifests itself in a bunch of different ways, but mostly self-harmful. And so I had a lot of challenges in my adolescence and in my 20s with just being a pretty violent person and being someone who was lashing out, and forget about anybody in a position of authority, right? Like, who you going to tell me? What are you going to tell me?
Right.
I don't, I didn't answer to anybody really. I was, again, I'm, the king of my own castle, but golly, like how fake is that? Right. I mean, you realize really quickly that's not a long-term solution. And so I think once I was able to purge some of that, I knew that all the things that I felt, all the things that I did to myself to impede my own success, I couldn't pass that along. I couldn't put that on one of my kids, right? And so I remember having that very much in the forefront of my mind. And then, in fact, the whole reason I left my chef career was my son now, who is 11, when we found out my wife was pregnant with him. I was working at a restaurant in Charleston that I'd really worked my whole chef career to achieve, which was called The Ordinary. Opened it up as the chef de cuisine, beautiful seafood hall in Charleston. And it was, where we were chasing, best new restaurant, James Beard Awards, this, that, and the other things that as a young chef, you kind of latch your career onto. You think of it as a stepping stone and getting those accolades. But they're hollow in the big scheme of things. And so when my wife was pregnant, I realized what it was going to take for me to continue that career was going to make me have to sacrifice at home. And I just said, no, I had no plan. But I also was able to draw from all the chaos of my youth and say, no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. I've been through hard stuff, right? I got a lot of scar tissue from it. And I can be self-reliant. I'll figure something out. I have a work ethic that is undeniable. And so whatever that looks like, I want to be present. And so I left The Ordinary 2 weeks before my son Jackson was born. And I was fortunate to have a kind of transition opportunity with a guy named Brooks Wrights, who owns a bunch of restaurants in Charleston. Leon's was opening up at the time. Awesome place. And he gave me this opportunity where I could work in the mornings, Monday through Friday from 8 to 4, which went really nicely with my wife's schedule as a teacher. And so I just got to experience fatherhood for those first 6 months where I'm actually present and available. And that was for me a massive turning point.
Yeah. I love it. I love everything you just said there. And I get it. Everybody has dreams. Everybody wants to accomplish something. Everybody wants to have this award, that title, or whatever. But you're eschewing those things because, like you said, in the big scheme of things, They don't matter.
Yep.
Like when you're 85 years old, if the Lord is that gracious, you're not going to care if you have a James Beard Award. You're going to care that you have that you have a good relationship with your son and that you know your grandchildren.
Yep.
And that they love you and that you love them.
I want to be able to look at my kids and them look at me and just feel that connection.
Yeah.
Right. I want to see my sons be great husbands and fathers. Right. Because I never saw it. Right. And it's like, and I used to, and I still, there's like some jealousy and envy, right? When I see folks that have grown up. I'm a 46-year-old man, right? And I'm pretty confident. I stand on my own 2 feet, but I still look at folks. My wife has incredible parents. Her parents, my in-laws, are the absolute best. And the way that they've watched over their flock is inspiring. And that gives me something to still shoot for. Like, okay, what does being a great granddad look like? And even now, it's freaking, I almost dropped an F-bomb, but it's wild to think that after all these years, I've just recently reconnected with my dad and trying to face the anger and all of that as a man and say, you know what, me carrying this with me isn't helpful for me. And there was a turning point there when my son Jackson looked at me. He's probably 4 years old, and I'll never forget it. We were talking about my mom. We were talking about my wife's parents, and he looked at me and goes, "Where's your dad?" I was like, "Woof! Oh, wow! Let's see. You're 4. Are we ready to unpack that toolbox?" And that was complicated, right? Where I looked at my wife and I'm like, my dad had been working to reconnect. Like, he has a complicated history and I don't want to, air all his dirty stuff, but he had his own journey and there's a lot of unforgivable stuff there, but I need to work to at least make peace with it. Right. And understand we all have challenges and they shouldn't necessarily follow us our entire lives. And so that's what I'm kind of coming to grips with. And when my son looked at me and asked that, I wasn't ready to have that dialogue, right? I'm still hard pressed to, but I told my wife, call him, because he had reached out to my wife. He found her on Facebook, reached out to her, they connected, and I said, let Jackson speak to him. Like, I'm not going to have my anger, my frustrations, my baggage influence him. That's exactly what I'm trying to get away from, right? And so they connected. And my wife, recounts the story as, they hopped on and they exchanged some pleasantries. And then he was like, my son, 4 years old, super naive, is like, where have you been? Like, why? And just very to the point. But then my wife said the cadence of the conversation, she was like, you have no idea how similar all three of you guys are. The way, the mannerisms of the cadence of the way you guys talk, the rhythm, the voice. And for this guy, not to be there and present for so many years, but yet there's so many similarities. When my wife hears it, she's like, it's spooky.
It's in the DNA.
For sure.
It is. I mean, I am more or less a carbon copy of my dad, with the exception that he is much less talkative than I am. And then my youngest son, Noah, he's me, so he's my dad. I mean, we're all, I don't know. It's such a weird and bizarre thing. And that, dude, wow, out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, like, where's your dad?
Yep.
Man, where you been?
Yep. No,
like, that's
pretty comical.
It is, but it's a, number one, like you said, I'm not sure I'm ready to unpack that luggage yet. And that's even, for a 4-year-old, I mean, you got to try and keep it simple, but it's not simple.
Yeah.
So that's tough. So, I mean, the defining chapter of your life, or if we can just put the Cliff Notes version on it, is overcoming adversity.
For sure.
And so now we've got this guy who is, so with all of this baggage and with all of this adversity, we're going to leave what we know to be a present husband and a present father, and we're going to start red clay hot sauce. And of course, there's more to that story with iDefine,
Yep.
Southern Roots Barbecue. So, I don't know, man. I don't even know where to start with all of that. So just take it and run.
Well, after Jackson was born, right, we were living in Charleston. My wife was teaching. My wife's a special education teacher. So my wife is, she's a godsend, right? And so we met in 2000, shortly after I moved to Charleston, and started dating. So we've been together 26 years now. And she was a teacher at a school off Dorchester Road, which we lived in West Ashley. And if you know the landscape of Charleston, you can imagine that drive was not ideal. And Charleston's cost of living had gotten to be atrocious at this time. This is 2014, 2015. And then my wife's pregnant again. So we have Jackson. He's, my boys are 18 months apart, so do the math. And so we just knew that we didn't need to be in Charleston. My mom is in Atlanta still, and her parents are from Greenville. So we knew we wanted to make our way back to the upstate. So there was an opportunity for me to leave Charleston and land in Greenwood, South Carolina. I'd never been to Greenwood.
Great place.
It's nice. My sister-in-law lived there with her family, her husband and her family. And so we were able to transition and move there in 2015 while my wife was, shortly after, I guess, my second son was born, Griffin. So when we moved to Greenwood, I started working at a retirement community. It was, again, relatively good hours. It allowed this transition to happen where I was able to continue to launch Red Clay. We were still figuring things out, just letting it organically grow. But we were trying to move our way back to the upstate. And while we lived in Greenwood, my wife became pregnant again with my daughter, Ella. And that's kind of this other pivotal moment in my life where my daughter was born, and right away, very early on, even in the hospital, she had a heart murmur, and just one doctor picked it up. It was the pediatrician, and a lot of folks didn't originally connect it. She had that, so we were on high alert. And then over the course of the first several months, my wife started noticing she wasn't meeting her developmental milestones. And for me, I'm like, yeah, she's different. Every kid's different, right? It's our first girl. Maybe something happens differently there. But again, my wife's a special education teacher. She taught severe and profound. Her sister, Katie, has Down syndrome. And they're 2 years apart. So my wife went to school as a special education teacher, right? She went to college, Charleston, graduated, but she had the textbook version of becoming a special education teacher, but she had in the very fabric of who she is, what it is to be a special education teacher because of her sister.
Mm-hmm. Her radar is pinging.
100%. And so at 6 months old, we're already in all these different therapies. And I'm like, okay, like I'm just along for the ride, right? If this is what she needs to do to get back, and she'll be running with the boys in no time. And then at about 7 months old, her physical therapist at the time was like, there's Greenwood Genetic Center right here. I was like, huh? What's that? And so we ended up getting genetic testing. And then I'll never forget, February 26, 2019, we get the diagnosis of Kleefstra syndrome. It's like, all right, there's a doctor from Rome in there visiting, this guy, Dr. Roger Stevenson, who was one of the founders of GGC. And the guy from Rome comes into the room when the diagnosis is delivered. And it's like, he's just there for a month, but he wanted to hear about it. I was like, okay, this is different. And so this was, a couple days after getting the diagnosis, we're learning, and it's just kind of this blurry moment. But I'll never forget when my wife fell into my arms on February 26th saying she has this disorder. I'm like, all right, what are people doing about it? Like, she's bawling.
Oh, you're the total man. It's like, all right, problem, let's solve it.
Right.
You know,
Like, well, I was like, "What? This can't be that hard." Turns out she's one of 6 in South Carolina at the time, one of less than 1,000 in the world. And I was like, holy smokes. And so that at that point, my whole life is upended, right? Then it's
Yeah.
like, my baby girl, there's something wrong with her that no one's working on. What? Like, there's no one else out there working on it. And so I went through a couple of months of looking at things and trying to figure out who was doing what. And eventually I was frustrated. I'm like, no one's doing enough, right? Like, why is no one fixing this? And so the condition's so new that Dr. Kleefstra, her name's Titschke Kleefstra, and she's in the Netherlands. And I reached out to her like Friday night, 10 o'clock at night. They're 6 hours ahead. So, 4 in the morning on a Saturday, she responds and says, hey, you should go to Boston. And I was like, all right, there's my marching orders. So I went off to Boston with my daughter, with my wife, met a team up there. And I was like, what do you guys need? Like, what do we need to actually make progress here? And they said, we need to create a center where folks can be seen, right? And then there was a community in the UK, but they weren't focused on research. And so it became apparent pretty quickly that we needed to develop a 501c3 here to actually build the community, but also I became a citizen scientist overnight, where I just dove into genetics, understanding the clinical implications of this condition, as well as how to potentially create some sort of scientific treatment and intervention to allow my daughter to live as fulfilling a life as she can.
it's a lot to digest.
Yeah,
I mean, you obviously, it was a lot more for y'all to digest. We're just hearing the story.
Yeah.
That's a punch in the face, but you're a guy who's accustomed to adversity.
That was it, man. And again, when I talk about like connecting all the dots, right? Like, I went to Episcopal school when I was in elementary school. I went to Catholic high school. I'm not Catholic. I struggled with religion. I wasn't really convinced of a lot of things. I'm a very analytical brain, so I question a lot of things. But there's no doubt at this point in my life, and there's been some other kind of inflection points where like God has had a hand in all of this, right? Like, there's I have big shoulders, and so like now it's like I realize the amount of blessings I have is immediately I knew how blessed I was. Is my daughter's given this diagnosis. How many other people have a wife that are 20 years in special education? How many other folks have grandparents of their child that have a lifelong experience of raising a child with special needs? All that's covered for me.
Yeah.
Like, what time do I have to mope and complain about my situation, right? So then it's, well, all these other people that are faced with this adversity who don't have the resources that I do, I can go help them, right? Like, I have to give back. Like, to whom much is given, much is expected, right? So, like, everyone faces challenges. Everyone has their stuff. So, like, I don't want anybody ever to hear my story and be like, oh man, tough guy, or tough luck, dude. Everyone has this, right? It comes in different ways, shapes, and forms, but everyone has it. It's about how you conquer it, how you master it, how you become mentally tough to overcome it.
Right. Yeah. I know the feeling. In some regard, the last 10 months of my life have been a grind for various reasons, but sinking down in the mire and getting emotionally despondent and depressed doesn't help anything.
No.
It only makes things worse. So I can, like you, focus on, okay. And I'm not denying, I'm not saying it doesn't suck.
Yeah.
Because it does. But there's nothing I can do about it.
Yep. Control what you can control.
Exactly. And so, okay, let me just take a breath. I'm going to man up on this, and I'm going to do what needs to be done. And the things that I cannot control, I'm not going to stress about. And the things that I'm just going to do what I can do and let everything else, let God take care of everything else. And so I mean, I admire that, and that's a great challenge. And I hope that some people some people that are listening to this episode, if they're having a hard time, I hope they draw some strength from that and maybe get some perspective.
Oh, for sure.
Just because you can't, like this, the things that come at you in this life for whatever reason that they do and that they're allowed to, if you don't have the proper perspective, it'll crush you.
Yep.
It will absolutely destroy you. And you can't fix everything and you can't change anything. You can only you can only control yourself, which means I can control my outlook, I can control my attitude, and I can control my actions.
Yep.
And that's about it.
But if you do that, it's amazing the impact you could have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? That's what's been really transformative is once I was able to mentally overcome these things and continue, like still today, I'm like facing like, what are my weaknesses? Where can I improve? And constantly trying to push myself to be more. But I think I don't think people give themselves enough credit for what they're capable of.
Sure.
Right? Like, I mean, Southern Roots is an example. Like I looked around last year, I'm like, holy cow, like what have we built here? This is freaking amazing. But it's just like, it starts with an idea. And then they always say it's that first step that's the hardest. And once you do that and you can start building momentum, man, the potential out there, yes, there's going to be challenges. Yes, there are going to be obstacles, but you either, like I like to do, is just run through the brick wall, right? Or you re-navigate, right? And you figure out, okay, that path isn't going to work. That path is closed. What's another solution? What's another way around this problem? Or how can we address it? Or how can I pull on community members around me to help solve this issue? And it's been a great learning experience for me, and to not put limitations on what is possible.
Well, I think that people, you said that people don't give themselves enough credit for what they are capable of, but I think the hindrance for a lot of people is that they're afraid.
Yeah.
They're afraid to try.
Yep.
But you'll never know until you try. And then, like you said, nothing is going to work out perfectly the first time or the third time or the fifth time, but it's just, do I have the resolve to keep going and just say, okay, A, B, and C didn't work. That's fine. I'm just going to toss those ideas in the garbage. Let me start on number D.
Yep.
And see how I can continue. Like you just have to have the resolve to keep moving.
And reduce your ego, right? You're going to fail. Everyone fails.
It's a great teacher.
Right? I mean, it's the best. Like, I have screwed up. I've faced a ton of adversity, and I've screwed up more than the average person. Like, if we were to unpack all the mistakes I made, it's going to be a pretty big mountain. And like, comparatively, it's probably bigger than a lot of other people who are afraid to acknowledge their mistakes or open themselves up to those mistakes because it can be embarrassing. I get it. Right. I mean, like, no one likes to say like, yeah, I did this. I'm, this is where I failed. It's hard. But again, I think this is where like being exposed to so much challenge early on, I think has just sculpted me a little bit differently. And so I have that different perspective. And it's like, there was a period in my life where I woke up every single day and, when people asked you the very generic, how you doing today? Right? Best day yet. I mean, start there. Like if you don't have that perspective that today is your best day yet, because it's another opportunity for you to enjoy this life or to make an impact on someone else, then I think starting with those just little mind shifts of having that perspective, like today it's going to be my best day yet.
Yeah.
And you're going to get beaten down throughout the day, but then you got to wake up tomorrow and you start there again. It's like digging a ditch. I had a chef mentor, Jimmy Sneed, never forget it, when he was talking about being a cook. And he was like, the goal of a line cook is to come in every single day and dig a ditch. You do all your prep work, you get your butt kicked all service. It deplenishes everything that you spent your whole day doing. But you look back at the ditch you dug and you said, man, that was a nice ditch I dug. And you come back tomorrow and you do it again.
Right.
And you do it again. And it hardens you, it shapes you, and it gives you the foundation, which then you can build upon.
Yeah. Well, let me just stop here really quick and say that I do a midweek solo reflection show called Between Sundays. There's no guests, no outlines, just a few thoughts if you want more than one conversation a week. And you can also find Between Sundays on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts. But I dropped that Between Sundays ad right there because I'm really enjoying the conversation and some things that you said. I just feel like it ties in. I haven't done the series I want to do yet on Between Sundays, but it's about identity. And I've been through some difficulty myself. I went through a divorce 6 years ago. I had 4 children at the time who were, 14 and under. I pastored for 12 years in Southern California. And then, and then having been divorced, I don't feel like I will ever be able to pastor again. It's just some of the rules, 1 Timothy 3, Titus 3. Some people have different opinions about that. But it was really hard for me. Like going to church after that was brutal because I was used to being the pastor and like I love the word of God and I love sharing it with people and I love expounding on it. And so I got to this place where I was having trouble figuring out who I was because I had misplaced my identity.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like my identity was being a pastor, right? And it took me a long time to get that figured out. And now I'm a much more solid person in understanding who I am. And like if you ask somebody, I think this is true probably 98% of the time. If you ask somebody who they are, they're going to tell you what they do. If I ask you, and I don't know how you would answer this, or just to anybody, like if I ask you who you are, you might say I'm the owner and founder of, Red Clay and iDefine and blah, blah, blah. But that's what you do.
What I do.
It's not
who
who
I am.
You are.
Yep.
And it just seems to me that you have a grasp of this because you've, through your trials as a child and now into making adjustments in family life to your values of what's being important as husband and father versus James Beard, Michelin star, now I've got a child with this rare disease and we're going to do something about it. Like who Geoff Rhyne is, he's a man, in my opinion, he knows who he is. He knows his values. He's steady as a person, which has nothing to do with being a chef.
No.
And so it's just,
at the end of the day, I think I'm a servant.
Same.
That's what I'm. That's
show's
what I'm
over.
Here to do.
We're done.
Right?
Yes, I get that. Fires me up.
Yeah.
Man. I exist to help people.
Yep. That's why I'm here, and I think, I've really come under that assumption in the past several years. I had referenced my mom passed away of ovarian cancer a couple years ago, and that hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
Right. Because she was that constant. She was the rock that I had so much respect for. And when she passed, it still hurts me. Her birthday was February 20th and she would have been 77. And it's like
always going to hurt.
Oh, of course. But at that time, right before that, actually, we started going to Grace Church here in Greenville. And I did it originally. My wife was keen to do it. She's really faithful. And so she wanted to go do it. We were calling around different churches and trying to figure out where was the spot for us. And what something interesting that we learned is we have to have considerations for our daughter. And we called a bunch of churches and they were like, well, she needs to be able to do this, that, and the other. And we were like, we have to fit in this box to be able to come serve at your church. And it felt almost unchristian. And so I was just like, that's not for us. And then we found Grace and they had this program called Mosaic. which has been transformative. And basically what they do is they offer this entire program for individuals' special needs, where come as you are. And we're equipped. This is another part of our ministry. And so we started doing that. And then as we started getting into the church and going to the services, like, man, this is helpful. And then as my mom was going through her sickness, and then towards the end, there was messages in each service that like felt like they were directed towards me. And I was like, oh my God, like what is happening right now? And
I love it.
I'm an unemotional person. And there was like a 4-week stretch where every single service we went to, I was in tears. And it was just like, okay, like, I don't know who this person is that I am. But now, you know, looking back, it's like, why were we in Greenwood, South Carolina? Why is my wife my wife? Why was she given the opportunity to be a sister to a child with Down syndrome? Why did I have all this adversity and all these challenges? It's like I was being equipped this whole time without my knowledge for what I was going to be facing. And it's like, I was like, man, that feels very rewarding, that then the next time you face a challenge, you're not like, how do I beat this? You're like, okay, just keep moving, right? Keep moving towards it. And I feel like there's something bigger and better out there for me, that I'm protected.
It is much easier. Like, you can't see God in the future, but it's easy to see him in the past.
Yeah. So, whoa. Yeah, 100%.
You just look back and you see all of those things.
Yep. And that's where faith is developed, right?
Yeah. You see how he's walked along, man. And you don't know, when my wife, I've probably said this before, I don't know if I've said it on the podcast, but I've told a lot of people, when my wife had her massive debilitating stroke 10 months ago, it was one of those things, just like with your daughter. It's like, okay, as a husband and as a father, you're a couple of things. You're a protector, you're a provider, you're a fixer. That's what husbands do. But that's beyond you.
Right.
I can't.
It's helpless.
Oh, if you like it, it will humble you.
Yeah.
Which is really the necessary part, the breaking. And I was talking to my mom the other day about this idea. Like, you have to be broken if you're going to grow. And I guess the way I'm seeing it is, if you had a vessel, a big one, and you filled it up with water or whatever, and then you took another smaller glass vessel and you put it in the middle, nothing will enter into that center vessel. But if you crack it, if you break it a little bit, then things can start pouring in. And God is trying to put certain things into you and shape you and mold you. But unless you break a little bit, they can't get in there. And so that moment for a man where he can't fix it, he can't provide whatever, it's breaking. And I'm like I couldn't do anything, and I am just along for the ride, and you don't know what tomorrow looks like. You don't even, in those days when we were in neurological intensive care right before the surgery and directly after surgery, when she's under major stroke protocol for 72 hours, because we don't know what's going to happen. And you don't know, like I said, let alone what tomorrow is or the next 10 minutes.
Yep.
There's a hymn that I love. It's called His Eyes on the Sparrow. And in that verse, it says, though by the path he leadeth, but one step I may see. And that's it, dude. Sometimes God is leading you along, and you only get enough light for the next step. And that's okay. And I'm like, okay, I'll take this step.
Yep. It's having the courage to take that step.
Yeah, I'll take this next step, God, and I know you're going to walk with me. And when you give me enough light to see the next one, I'll take that one. And it's...
Well, you realize how broken you are, right? I mean, there's, as much as I say I rely on myself for everything that I've come from, there's also arrogance in that, right? To think that I can continue to tackle things on my own, independent, right? And I think my mom's passing was kind of revelation for me in that I couldn't fix that. I couldn't bring her back to life. She was gone.
Yeah.
So but I miss her.
Yeah.
So how do I connect with her? And I feel her. You know, like I know she's always here. It's so token to say, but like I genuinely feel her. And there's moments where I'm like, like, you know, like I feel her, I see her. My sister has these same experiences. And so, you know, I just have this humble faith that, you know, I'll see her again in a reunited perfect form, and we won't have any of that brokenness. But it was a good reflection to me that as confident as I am and as strong as I am in drawing from things that I've been through, that's also like an arrogance there, and you have to humble yourself and come under the fact that I'm just here to serve.
Right.
I'm here to be the best version, to be the best Christian, to be the best follower of Jesus, and to share that. Like, others can draw strength in that, right? If you're feeling down and out, if you're going through your struggles, like nothing changes overnight. Like, I'm 46 years old and still grappling with things from my childhood, right? So it doesn't change, but when you start getting that clarity and that perspective of who you are and where you're going and ultimately what will come, it puts you at ease. When I talk about not being able to be at ease, like that's the thing also that's like, okay, like if I say a prayer, it's like, okay, I'm good. Like there's going to be some things, but even the pain is going to be temporary.
Yeah.
No matter how extreme that pain can get, it's temporary.
Yeah.
Right? It's all going to be relieved one day. And that hope, I have hope tattooed on me, like that hope and that faith. I have Cherokee roses. You know, they say that like on the Trail of Tears, as the women were walking from the Carolinas to Oklahoma, that as the women's tear hit the ground, a Cherokee rose bloomed, and that was the symbol of hope to keep carrying on. So, having that hope and that faith is what I think carries me through even the most challenging of times now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I want to back up just a little bit. We ran that faith tangent, which I'm down for. I
love some Jesus.
Dude, I could spend hours on it, man. Like just the idea of a servant. If Jesus, the God-man, the Savior of the world, who said that the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, which means to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many, and you see him washing the disciples' feet. Okay. If he himself if he's the example, and he's the Savior, and he's the Lord, and he's being a servant, what is my job as just this broken, carnal, earthly flesh bag? And you're there to serve.
And think about the good you can do, even for the folks that are non-believers, right? Because this is something that I've gone through. It's like, say you don't believe.
That's fine.
But look at this example of this person. Is that not something you would want to follow? But you can cut and dice things the way you want to, right? But to sit here and say Jesus wasn't a good man, or if you followed the way he taught, would your life improve or would it get worse?
Right.
Right. I mean, there's no argument, I don't think, that you can really make. Like, and to each their own. But I just think that, you know, when I was going through those struggles of like, well, whatever, you know, this, that, and the other, not really leaning into the faith, then it became really crystal clear at some point. It's like, why not just believe?
Mm-hmm.
Say you're wrong. You're still going to be able to look back and say, look at all this good I did.
Yeah.
That you couldn't do without it.
I've never looked at it that way before, but it's an excellent line of thought that whether you believe about the divinity of Christ and his ultimate mission and the spiritual side of it, if you don't believe that, fine. If you do, great. But if you just want to live your life practically, in line with the way he taught and the things he said, well, your life's going to be better
for sure.
Because it's a matter of sowing and reaping. In most instances, that we reap what we sow, and if we sow good things, I mean, it's a matter of the system that God has designed and consequences. And so if I do well, generally speaking, there's good things.
And there's a lot of comfort in that anchor and that compass that it provides, right? It's like, this is my foundation where I can really have roots, but this also gives me a pathway forward. Like, this is what I'm following. This is my North Star. This is directionally how I intend to live my life. And I think living a life of intention is incredibly important.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
Absolutely. All right. Like I said, let's backtrack just a little bit. So, you and your wife get the news about your daughter's condition, and you are immediately, all right, well, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to fix this? What's being done about it? You're doing, like you said, I'm an overnight geneticist.
Yeah. Yeah. Quickly.
Yeah. And so that is the impetus for Southern Roots Barbecue.
For sure.
Right. So how long, just kind of clean up the time frame for me between my daughter has this health condition. We need to find a way to, you know what, let's take a quick break. Sorry about that. We'll be right back. When your daughter gets her diagnosis and then you decide, all right, we got to raise money so we can start putting some research into this thing and help people. And then the idea, like how do you come up with the idea of Southern Roots? I mean, it makes sense. You're chef, there's food, but out of all of the things that you could do to be a fundraiser, why the barbecue? And then how long did it take to come up with that brainchild?
Yeah. I mean, I think the roots of it is I have a lot of trouble asking for help. And so traditionally fundraising is going out and asking for people's help. And so, as well as the resources.
Right.
And that's just not who I am. It's very uncomfortable for me. And so,
give me your money.
Yeah. It's like, it's just not, and there's so much inauthenticity around fundraising and nonprofits. I mean, you can go on all kinds of tangents and rabbit holes there that we won't today. But that was the genesis. It was like, I'm not just dialing for dollars. That's not me. What can I do? Because it became apparent really quickly for anybody that understands medical research. Think about the amount of money that's gone into cancer research, and whatever your opinions are of how it's being allocated, the reality is that medical research costs millions of dollars.
Right.
And what we're trying to do is not only create a scientific intervention that is a treatment and potentially a cure, but we also have to build in supports for what that clinical care looks like along the way. And so I just remember our first initial effort, we launched in COVID. What a time. 2020 is when we founded the nonprofit. And in talking with Boston Children's Hospital, I wanted to establish a clinic specifically for Kleefstra syndrome at a world-renowned institution, and that became BCH. And the first proposal I saw for them was 6 figures. And so I knew I needed to launch that, though. I knew that had to be the first, like, we needed a place that we could call home, where folks could go be seen by a doctor who knew this condition, because that didn't exist in the entire U.S. And like Dr. Kleefstra was the one. And it's unrealistic to think that people are just going to be flying to Europe just to have their child be seen for clinical care. And so we did that. And then just as we started entertaining the idea of what a research program looked like, I realized that we weren't talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. We were talking about millions and millions of dollars. And so with dialing for dollars out of the realm of possibility, and just also understanding that this was going to have to be a continual effort, I looked around of what folks did to raise money, and then I looked around what resources I had. And it dawned upon me quickly that my entire chef career was spent going to 4, 5, 6, 7 events every single year that were some sort of a fundraiser. And I was like, that's what we should do. And at the time, a good buddy of mine, Jason Calloway, had a place called Bacon Brothers over on Pelham. Fantastic barbecue place. Him, Anthony Gray, those guys. And I was actually making hot sauce for their restaurant. I was making their hot sauce for them, not as a part of Red Clay, but since I was already fermenting peppers and doing all this, that, and the other. So I was seeing them pretty frequently. And I talked to Calloway and I was like, what if we threw a party where we invited our different chef buddies and we raised money? And we just made it something that didn't feel like you were raising money. It just felt like chefs coming together to do some good, because that's what we've always done. And he was like, we need to talk to this lady, Brenda. And so he shortly thereafter introduced me to Brenda Luganbill of CB Events. And it just turns out that she had in her mind that she wanted to do an event here locally. And we all kind of aligned on the fact that we had wanted it to be kind of a barbecue event. We wanted it to be no frills. We wanted it to be something enjoyable. And that's kind of where I remember the meeting in Bacon Brothers. We sat down and kind of created the concept and then stewed around the names, and then just Southern Roots was born. And so from that first year to, we're going into year 5 this year on April 11th. And it's become way more than I could imagine, honestly. Like it's not only are we bringing in chefs, like it's really cool that I have some chef relationships where I get to see these guys year after year, as well as form some new relationships. But we also have been able to bring in 15 to 20 families from across the country that have a child with this condition that have not met another family with the similar circumstance. And so it's almost this reunion, right? It is based upon this kind of family reunion where year after year, to a large degree, the same folks who are chefs and participants like yourself come back year after year, because we've now developed this sense of community where it does feel like a reunion, where we get to come back, we get to visit with each other, and it doesn't feel necessarily like you're just raising money.
Yeah, so this is more than fundraising.
100%, right? It's really a community, and it's connection, and that is what's powerful. And the fact that we're raising money as a byproduct of it is fantastic, right? We raised over $100K last year. And so it's something that I'm certainly proud of. I love doing it. And now we're looking at ways that how do we take what we've done and actually expand it?
Right. So, I've been there every year since its inception, 4 years as the cigar box, year 1 as a helper to my good buddy, Jason Jansen at Broadwater Shrimp. Shout out to Jason. And last year felt packed.
Yeah.
And last year seemed like, to me, there's more people than ever. And so when you look at how it's grown, what is that telling you?
So it tells me that the event is itself creating connections with people, right? And I think that one of the takeaways from last year is I don't want it to get bigger. Like, bigger isn't always better.
Right.
Right. And so we need to be pretty strategic about how now we take what we've created and do additional things with it. Because if you just try to pack as many people in there as you can, you lose the essence of what we started to create. And so we have to be really careful as we curate going forward.
Okay. There's a delicate balance there.
Yeah.
I really feel like, because on one hand, now you've created an atmosphere that you really feel like is a community of people. And on the other hand, we want to raise as much money as possible for these families and for the research to help future families who are going to need it. But I don't want to just, blow the doors off and make this thing enormous and destroy the community. So how do you walk that tightrope?
Yeah.
That's probably the question, right?
There's a lot of tension there, right? Because 100% we want to maximize what we're doing, but we have to make sure that you don't lose the essence of what you're doing in the process. And I think that's what that is the tendency, is just to go bigger, 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 bigger. And then you reflect back and you're like, man, we lost what we were. Right. So I think we have to have kind of a cutoff. And for me, I think last year with all in, attendees, volunteers, everyone that was at the event, I want to say we were around 2,500 people. And I don't think we want to go bigger than that.
Okay.
So then you're thinking about, okay, well, how do we take this and create satellite opportunities? And one thing that has evolved out of that is my buddy Whitney Spinks, who has been, he sat on the board, he helped create Southern Roots, and now he has come up with this idea. I can't take credit for it. He had this idea of creating this more music centric, this more intimate event that is going to be called Ella's Friends. And so basically we're going to create an event with just a couple hundred people, because for me to get up on stage in front of 2,500 people in the middle of Southern Roots, for those of you who've been there, you can't really hear the message of what we're trying to accomplish. Right. Like that is there is storytelling there. There is like intimacy required to really grasp it. In the middle of the event, I'm sensory overloaded.
It's too busy. There's
right?
too much
100%.
going on. It wouldn't work.
So we need something, and we need additional touch points, right? Whether it's with donors that we've had recurrently. We've had some amazing continuous sponsors. Ron Malone is at the front of the list from Dodson. He has been a tremendous supporter from year one, and the Spinks family and their foundation and the Laura DuPont Foundation. We have, I run the risk of leaving people out, so I'm going to shut up because there's so many people who have contributed to this event that have made it what it is today. And now it's like what I envisioned for Southern Roots and what we started with early on is, yes, I want iDefine to be a benefactor. But again, I'm a community person, and there's other organizations, and there's also these restaurants that are participating where I want to have touch points throughout the year where it really feels like a rising tide lifts all boats. And so there's an organization in the upstate called Kind of the Upstate. And basically what this organization does is they go into the schools and they educate elementary age children and other children throughout the upstate about the differences of someone that's neurotypical versus someone that might have special needs, and opening up that conversation. So if you see a child in a wheelchair, don't just stare, create a conversation, right? Like we got to normalize some of that and get comfortable with engaging there. And I think Kind of the Upstate has a really cool model. And so last year we gave them a grant. Out of $5,000 went to their organization from Southern Roots. But it's also all these chefs who are volunteering their time and energy. How are we creating touch points throughout the year? Restaurant business is hard, right? And these guys are doing. I got Rob Levitt, bless him, flies in from Chicago every single year from the Publican. And then you have your local restaurants, Henry's Barbecue. You got Jason at Broadwater. You got Indaka. You got, again, all these different folks you can find on the website, southernrootsreunion.com, who are coming out to give their time and energy. How do we reciprocate that? I don't want to be someone who just consumes. It's another thing that we talk about in church and in faith.
Not a giver.
You can't just consume,
right?
Because that has a shelf life, and so you got to make sure that it's reciprocal. And so I want to create other opportunities, and I think we're starting that this year with Ella's Friends on the Friday night before the event, where we're going to hold an event out at this farm. It's going to be super intimate. We got world-class musicians coming to it, but it also offers more engagement for me and for us to connect with a smaller group of people who are really interested in the mission and what we're trying to accomplish, and understand like all the things that we have going on, of course, because we're moving incredibly fast for such a young organization.
Yeah. No, dude, that sounds freaking rad. Speaking of rad, 5th annual Southern Roots Barbecue, if you're listening to this podcast, that's coming up April the 11th. That's the second Saturday in April. And you can get tickets to that at
southernrootsreunion.com.
southernrootsreunion.com. As I said, I've been there every year. The food's amazing. The music's great. There's a vendor market. It's a bunch of local vendors. Yours truly will be out there slinging smokes, and I mean, it's just a great time. And like you said, you don't feel like you're raising money. You feel like you're stuffing your face and having a few drinks and listening to great music. And it really is, it's a taste of barbecue across America.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of local chefs, but they're not all local.
Yeah.
You got people coming from
Texas, Chicago. I mean, they're coming from all over the place, right? And so it's been, I think, the diversifying the Southern foods, right? It is this diverse cultural mix, and so I think having that diversification in what we offer is kind of like a hallmark. We have like 15, 16 different tents, and each time we pair these chef groups with each other, and they come up with different things. And I think there's a lot of versatility in what we offer. And then you got the VIP stuff, which, the past couple of years, we've had this whole tuna butchery from Sushiyama out in TR. Yeah. They were doing that and doing like hand rolls to order. Jason from Broadwater is partnering with Endako to do kind of a seafood fest for the VIP this year, which is pretty exciting. I've known Jason we knew when my sons were born in Charleston. I knew Jason then. I remember us going to the pool at I lived in a little townhome in Charleston, and Jason would come over and we'd go swimming when my kids were little, right? Yeah. So it's funny to see, how we've both arrived at similar locations, and now he's doing Broadwater, which is the best shrimp in town, and scallops. I'll put a plug in. I mean,
if you're not, look, I'll just say it. If you're not getting your seafood from Broadwater shrimp, then you probably should make better life choices.
You're hustling backwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
yeah.
I don't know. It's just the reality of the situation. I met Jason when I was working at Revival Butchery whenever Broadwater was in its infancy.
Yeah.
And then we became friends, and he kind of helped me with the idea of the cigar box.
Oh, very cool.
And so he's one of my best friends.
Yeah.
He's a
good
great
dude.
guy. But yeah, I mean, if you come to Southern Roots Barbecue, you're going to get brisket, but you might also get like shrimp and grits.
Yeah.
And you might get something with lamb.
Yep.
And you might, I mean, it's wild, and it's wildly good.
Yeah, they did. I think Jason did a shrimp pizza.
Yeah.
Either last year or the year before. But I mean, my buddy Bill Wilder over at Henry's, they did an alligator sausage. We've had some ridiculously good things. Joe Cash, what did he do last year? It was like a truffled beef cheek or something. It was like some of the stuff that's out there is like, okay, this, for the value that's being generated for the ticket price, where it's all inclusive, all you can eat, all you can drink, it's like hopefully we're creating value where people feel that. And it's also just different, right? I mean, I think the whole vibe, and that's what we're seeking to do, the vibe is different than other food events that you could go to.
Yeah, so you can spend X amount on whatever ticket, and there's a couple of tiers. You can do the whole VIP thing if you want. You can get your general admission ticket, but you can pay all that, and guess what? You get to, in one day for that price, you get to eat at Endako. You get to eat at Henry Smokehouse. You get to eat at Scoundrel, Joe Cash. You get to eat at Fork Grove Barbecue with Dylan Cook. You get to,
Yeah.
And all the while, you're helping families.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's...
Yeah, it was... Last year, my wife and I literally just walked around and just had like smiles. Like, I couldn't really even speak to people. I was just... Talk about being humbled.
Yeah.
Right? Because for me, it's so personal. Because I know the impact this is having on my family and my daughter. And just thinking that whether those people knew it or not, like them showing up, that was for us. It was for other families that are similar to mine, that are walking this journey. And it's like, again, folks that are coming from Texas, there's families coming from Michigan, there's families coming from Kansas, and they're all coming there because of what we've created. And that's super humbling, but it doesn't happen without all these people. Right. And so that's what's really cool is there's no one person that takes credit for this. This is 100% built by all the different moving parts that are out there. Yeah. And that is kind of when you like look at the big picture of it all. And it's just, it was a marvel to my wife and I last year of what it became.
Yeah. So look, if you want, I highly advise that you attend Southern Roots 2026. Go on the website. I will put the website link in the show description, so it's easy for you to find. Get your tickets before they're sold out, because you heard Geoff say we're not. I mean, we've kind of found where we want to be, and we're not going to just
We don't want it.
infinitely increase this thing. So tickets are limited.
100%.
So get your tickets. You won't regret it, and at the same time, you're helping families. You're helping iDefine. So back with iDefine, just really maybe not really quick, maybe not. We'll see where it goes. Where can people go to learn more about iDefine?
So we have our website, idefine.org. I'm working at getting better with putting that information out there. We have a newsletter that you can sign up on, because that's where, and podcasts are actually, this kind of long form opportunity to discuss things is so critical, because I can only put in, so much information in a couple of paragraphs, right? Or in a social media post. I'm terrible at social media anyways. So we're actually looking for help there to help us kind of grow our social media presence, as well as making our website more dynamic, because the amount of information that's in my head about what we're doing rarely is able to be translated, because there's just so much happening in real time.
Right.
With our research programs. And it's also, how do you break that language down? Because I could sit here and talk to you about ASOs and different genetically modified research opportunities that for me 6 years ago, like, this dude's speaking Mandarin right now, right? And so it's like, okay, actually connect the dots of how this is going to help this kid, right? Or this community. And so there's so much of that, and there's an art to breaking down the very technical components of research into something that's digestible for someone to say, how can I help? Mm-hmm. Right? Or here's money. How can this be used? I think there's definitely some nuance there, but I'll just say that it's incredibly exciting. And I think that at this point, we're about to invest $500,000 within the next 30 days into research programs.
Sweet.
And it's just like, these research programs could open up the door where then biotech companies and pharma become really interested in Kleefstra syndrome as a condition, because we're going to need that support at some point to carry us into clinical trials and to go through the FDA and all the different steps and regs you have to go through. You're going to need partners, but for a citizen scientist like myself, and thinking about where we've come in the past 5 years, thanks to efforts like Southern Roots and some of our other big fundraising efforts, we're on like the precipice of like really big opportunities that will be impactful treatments and relieve, hopefully, the burden of care to a lot of the families.
Yeah. That's what I love about long form podcasts, man. You can let the stories unfold.
Yeah.
And you can really get into it. You can see who a person is and what they're going through or what they're trying to accomplish. And you can talk about iDefine and really kind of get into it. So, hey, look, I don't know who's listening to this podcast, but if you've got deep pockets and you want to help,
come on in.
Go,
water's fine.
Get on. So you guys, I mean, you've done some travel around the States to different hospitals and talked to people about what we need and what we need to develop. But is the focus of iDefine really about let's raise money and then we're just going to dump it into research? Or are you trying to build like a literal location for people to come and get care, or is this like all of it on the table for future plans?
Yeah, it's a three-legged stool, right? So we look at it as community, because the community is going to drive everything. We've got to identify more patients. We've got identified right now about 340 in the U.S. And just to wrap your mind around this, there's 10,000 that we believe are that have Kleefstra syndrome walking around in the U.S. just by prevalence models, predictive models that are out there. 10,000. There's a real critical challenge with access to genetic testing. A lot of times, folks are just told they have autism, but guess what? The condition of Kleefstra syndrome is caused by a gene called EHMT1. Interestingly enough, 96% of kids with Kleefstra syndrome have a dual diagnosis with autism. So there's actually a genetic underpinning to autism. And EHMT1, the gene that's causative for KS, has also been considered or found to be causative for autism. So there's folks out there who are walking around who have a diagnosis of autism, and they're not really, there's no treatment, right? They're kind of being bubble wrapped for the world, or they're getting ABA therapies. They're trying to figure out how to navigate this. But wouldn't it be interesting if all those folks were able to get genetically diagnosed and understand, like, okay, actually, this particular gene is causative for the symptoms that you're experiencing with autism? Because think about how wide the spectrum of autism is.
Right.
It's massive.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's 147 genes that have been determined to be causative by an organization out of New York called Safari. It's a derivative of Simon's Foundation, which is huge in the autism space. But there's scientific underpinnings to autism that have genetic roots. So imagine if you were able to distill down the spectrum of autism into these different genes. And then if you found a treatment for this particular gene, what if that actually helped symptomatic improvement for your child with autism? How are you ever going to know that without being diagnosed genetically, right? So there's a huge push there for us because we believe, there's 330 kids right now that we have diagnosed. So those 330 feel the sense of community that we've developed. But what about the other 9,000 plus that are walking around with Kleefstra syndrome that aren't diagnosed? It's like, holy cow, that's a huge hill to climb. So we're trying to tackle that. In parallel, if you go to the doctor, how do you treat Kleefstra syndrome? No one knew when we started. We just have released a international clinical guideline for Kleefstra syndrome. So this was an effort that took the last 18 months. Dr. Kleefstra, we had Dr. Emerald Palmer from Sydney Children's Hospital. We had families, parent participants, as well as clinical participants in these different categories for KS, whether it was heart, whether it was GI, whether it was all these different kind of symptomatic areas of KS. So now, if I go to my pediatrician here in Greenville, South Carolina, I could just ask them to download the care guidelines, and then they have a roadmap of how to offer care. But we also have the Kleefstra Clinic up in Boston that we continue to fund. Last year, we funded a $300,000 study called a natural history study, where we've enrolled 30 patients aged 2 to 11, which we've prioritized. And basically, those children will be followed for the next 3 years. Every single year, they'll have consistent touch points, and then we'll measure different aspects of how the disease progresses over time. Because then we'll use that information to say, okay, if we introduce a treatment here, then how does the disease course change? So it's all this information gathering and data gathering, which is a huge piece of the puzzle that feeds into the research. Because on the research side, we're doing things called small molecule development. We're doing the ASOs, which are antisense oligonucleotides, and then we're doing classical gene therapy. Classical, it's a funny term. You think about classical going way back, but it's all very novel and new. But it's highly interesting, and you're seeing examples in other conditions where they're succeeding. Like spinal muscular atrophy is the big one, SMA, where they were able to develop a treatment and reverse the course, and that's something that's super degenerative, where the child's passing. And if you reverse the course of that, how powerful is that?
Sure.
And so there's a lot of other rare diseases that have made some good headway that are in clinical trials that we're trying to get up on their foot. If it's a marathon, we're bearing down on them because we want the same experience for our kids. So it's this 3-pronged strategy of research, clinical care, and community, but they all are so interconnected that you can't do one effectively without the other.
Yeah. Now, some of this stuff, it's close to me. I have 2 nephews with autism, one pretty severe, and I know another guy from the stroke support group my wife and I go to. His son just was diagnosed with something super rare. I don't even remember the name of it. There's just a handful of cases globally.
Yeah.
It's wild. He went down to, I think, what is it, like some place in the Charleston area called Holy City or something like that?
Interesting.
I don't know. Anyway, and I understand, like, when you get a diagnosis for a child that is rare like that, I mean, it's hard, and it's devastating and it's emotional. And so to go back and do more clinical testing can be emotionally stressful. It can be
Yeah.
hard. So listen to what you're saying about all of these kids diagnosed with autism, but it may be cleefstra, or I don't know. Um, I don't know. How would you recommend parents who have this diagnosis go back and do more genetic testing?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I it is kind of like putting salt in a wound,
Right.
right? I understand that, but also you're the caretaker. So how can you equip yourself to give the best care if you don't have as many of the answers as possible?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you want to be well equipped?
Yeah.
Like for me, and again, I understand again that I'm a little bit unemotional here, so I can empathize with it, but for me, it's very practical. It's okay. If there's another layer here to understand that could then open up this specific community, because all these rare disease organizations have communities where then you actually are connecting with another family who maybe they're 3 years ahead of you, and you could ping them as a resource and be like, hey, I'm noticing this. What did you do? What was your experience? There's power in that. And now that data is actually being aggregated so you can actually have more resources and information at your fingertips to help you manage the care, because the burden of care is heavy, right? So I think that the opportunity here is to, there's organizations, one of which is called Probably Genetic. There's another one called Gene DX. And I would just encourage folks that have that autism diagnosis, because again, I think you're a small fish in a very big pond, right? And if there's an opportunity to bring that down a couple of ring sizes and just understand, okay, there's a more finite community out there that understands me more. Like people crave to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
People crave support. And so if you're going through that with a child who's been diagnosed as autism, I would just encourage them as emphatically as I could to dig a little bit deeper. And there's resources out there to help mitigate the costs and the expenses associated with genetic testing too.
Yeah. Well, knowledge is power, man.
For sure.
As the old saying goes. All right, look, let's I don't want to run you too close to your stop. Got to get you home we got to get you to the top of the driveway at the appropriate time. So just a closing thought here. You lived through a lot of chapters. Some you obviously didn't choose, and yet you're still building, which is awesome. So for the person listening who feels like they're in a hard chapter right now, what would you tell them about keeping purpose when everything feels heavy?
I mean, I think you just got to understand God first, right? I mean, I think that's the anchor, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're not alone, right? And I think that there's power in that connection and understanding that you do have someone always, right? And I think that right there is incredibly empowering. And then it gives you the confidence to move. It's what we talked about earlier. Take that step, right? Whatever that step looks like. And I've got folks and friends that have battled addictions, right? There's folks going through other trials and tribulations, and it's like, continue to try to put yourself out there in that world of being uncomfortable, because it's going to help you with growth. And I think that, like, I work out. I love going to the gym because it makes me feel how weak I am, right? And like, I just started this new wave of 75-day hard, which is, it's a demanding, grueling process where you've got to be really disciplined. And for me, it's all about growth. It's how do I put myself into these hard situations so that other aspects of my life become easier, right? And so I think that there's a lot to take away from challenges, and once you're able to start building some momentum, then it allows the other challenges to feel less like hills you got to climb and more like speed bumps.
Right. How do you keep, two more questions. How do you keep grinding without becoming hardened?
Yeah. That's a challenge. Right. I mean, I'm a very introspective person. I keep to myself a good bit. But I think my wife has certainly that grounding influence. I think we complement each other really, really well. And I think at the end of the day, I have the purity of my children, right? When I kiss my daughter every single morning and I kiss her at night and I see my boys and their hearts, it's like, that'll soften you, right? Right. It's and I'm being entrusted. Like I have all this baggage, all this weight, all these challenges that I face every single day, but I have to compartmentalize that because these kids are looking at me. Like when I did a 75-day challenge at the end of last year, my oldest Jackson was like, "Dad, what day are you on?" And it was like my own built-in accountability partner. But I'm constantly reminded how they're always watching me, right? And I don't always think about it, but then they will do something, and I'm like, "Don't do that." And then my wife's like, that looks familiar. And so it's just one of those reminders, like, man, like at the end of the day, we have something to pay forward. We have to have this servant mentality, right? And if without that being your perspective, you probably will get hardened, right? But if you can keep the perspective of I'm here to serve others and come under that, it makes everything else easier.
Yeah. All right, man. Last one. If you were sitting here, what did you say, 46?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. If you were sitting here and 16-year-old Geoff Rhyne was sitting here,
yeah,
what would you tell him?
Oh, man, buddy. Golly. You're going to make a lot of mistakes, but I mean, honestly, like, there was a lot of pain from those next several years that are coming his way, right? There's a lot of hardship that's coming his way, but I think giving him the promise of the future and the promise of salvation, that would have to be it. I mean, that's the only thing we could really hang on to, right? I mean, I want so bad for my children not to experience some of the same hardships.
Yeah.
And there's also a challenge in that where I can't protect them too much because it's coming whether I want it to or not. Like they're going to have to face their stuff.
Yeah.
So I've got to learn that I need to sit with that idea more, right? To be able to say, listen, I need to equip you because you're going to face this. Like, how can I build you so that you can face these challenges and maybe not lose some of the years that I lost because I didn't know how to face those challenges. And so, I mean, I'm telling you, man, I used to bourbon, woof, me and bourbon, and I've got a handle on it now, but there was a time in my life where that became my outlet.
You really had a handle on it.
Oh yeah. A daily handle. So yeah, I mean, like, I think for me, it would be, keep focused, control what you can control, and try to let go of the other stuff as soon as you could.
Sure.
Right. Because I think that baggage weighed me down heavier when I was younger. And now I know how to manage it better. So that's a heavy question though, dude. I'm going to have to sit with that today.
Great. Well, look, man, I appreciate you being honest and transparent about all this heavy stuff. It wasn't necessarily the intent of the episode, but you made it clear you're a transparent guy.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed talking about this immensely. And there's a lot of people who need to hear that you can build something meaningful even out of seasons that you didn't choose.
For sure.
And a lot of that is the Lord's work. Like he restores the years that the locusts have eaten.
Yeah.
Which is a great passage from the Old Testament. So I'm grateful that you came on. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. I hope it is. Again, everyone experiences hardship. So I hope the message, the take home message is that there's opportunity on the other side of all that, right? You just have to be able to bulldog and bulldoze your way through it. But man, I am so fortunate and blessed. And I love the fact that I get the opportunity to potentially make the kind of impacts that I can. Like at the end, when I'm 85 and I'm looking back at that, hopefully I'll be able to hang my hat on a few wins there.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks again for carving out a few hours to sit with me.
Yeah, man.
It's been awesome. And for you listeners, I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to Sunday Afternoon Smokes. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it on your socials, and share it with the world, because Sunday Afternoon Smokes is really sweet. We'll talk to you soon.